You said, think about the groups who use the flag, from police officers to the U.S. Army. These are the forces on the ground that make oppression happen. Now, the obvious point is, obviously, if the police and the Army were to go away, sensitive college students like you would be eaten alive. Let me ask you a deeper question, which is, you find America unfair? Okay. What's a fairer country? Can you think of a country where you'd rather, for example, go on trial for a felony?
There isn't really a country I'd rather be tried for a felony in. I really doubt that it's not really about me, you know. It's about black people and people of color in this country who, if they were tried for a felony, are much more likely than me to be put in prison for that.
Okay,
and I'm sure
I'll shift the question there. And by the way, I'm not arguing, never would argue that there aren't inequities here, that it's a perfect country or anything like that. Of course not. But is there a country in which African Americans would stand a chance of a fairer trial than the United States? Is there a fairer country? I mean, I guess my question is, like, do you have perspective on the world? When you say that all police and all cops are bad, do you really know what you're talking about?
Do I have perspective on the world? Yeah, I'm well aware that the United States is militarily involved in over 7 different countries right now. Beyond Iraq and Afghanistan, they're involved in Libya. They're involved in plenty of countries in Africa. We have drone bases across the world, and I think that the U.S. Imperial Forces are really the main force in the world right now, using military force to oppress people. And I think that while that's like a useful question to ask, like, which country would I rather be in, I'd rather that we focus on this country and how we can, you know, fix and improve this country.
But why is
the flag isn't this...
Okay, I get it, but and I think we should fix and improve the country. But you're basically saying the flag represents evil to the extent that it shouldn't be flown. And my question is, why is it always rich kids who make that point? Why is it always kids from a $62,000 a year college like Hampshire who are making that point? None of the workers who you claim to be representing ever say that. You never see anybody at a trade school burning the American flag. Have you noticed that? I'm not making this up in my mind, am I?
I think that you're more likely to pick up a story in which rich kids do burn a flag, on the basis that we have more access to the media. I mean, like, the flag burning wasn't
really? So you think it's like your average HVAC repair school, they're burning the flag? I keep reading these stories about people breaking down on college campuses, and I try to put myself in your position as a professor. So you have a kid come into your class crying about the election. As the adult, shouldn't you say, you know, it was just an election, and it was democratic, and nobody got cancer, and nobody died, and maybe you should toughen up a little? Why wouldn't you say something like that?
I think for many students, the result was, as for many people in the United States, a surprise. And I taught my class shortly after Hillary Clinton gave her concession speech. And for many students, particularly for young women, it was something a glass ceiling to break, to aspire to have a woman as president of the United States. And so I don't think it's about, as you were saying, being hysterical, but it's about processing and having the space to make sense of what happened and to have a discussion.
I get it, but it's also about having safe spaces. And at the University of Michigan Law School, where adults have presumably attend, and I'm quoting now, post-election self-care and food and play. So this included Play-Doh and Legos, a safe space for people to go to, you know, feel, I don't know what. And that is kind of the question to you. What is a safe space exactly?
Well, in my opinion, the role of higher education is to foster debate, but also to be cognizant of students that are coming to our campuses from many different backgrounds. I work at DePaul University, which is an urban campus here in Chicago, a very diverse campus. And so, for example, in my class, the way that I approached it the day after the election was to return to themes that we had talked about prior to the election in terms of the role of a press in a free society. And
okay, but wait a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. And I think those are great questions, and I'm glad that you're raising them. But the role of the university, in practical terms, is not to foster debate. It's to squelch it. And so people who disagree are crushed, and people who agree with the herd are elevated. I mean, is there really a debate? Do you know a single DePaul University professor who voted for Trump and said so out loud? Do you know one?
You know what? I do not talk about my personal political leanings with my colleagues.
You know as well as I that there isn't any. at all. And
You
isn't
know
that
what?
a problem? Isn't that a lack of
I don't think
diversity?
that you have any I don't think that you have any evidence to support that claim, and that's actually not the right question. The right question is the role of the university to, again, I teach journalism, and so what I said to my students the day after the election was returning to the role of a press in a free society. And our role as journalists, as you would know, is to hold all elected officials accountable, regardless of our personal
but also our powerful
leanings.
people. And you're a professor, and so you fall into that category, if I can say, as someone to whom others look for guidance. And I just kind of want to press you on this diversity question. So the whole idea of diversity is that the airless room produces bad decisions. We need people from different walks of life who have different points of view in order to make wise decisions. I think that's the underlying justification for it. And yet, in academia, there's virtually no one who disagrees from the liberal orthodoxy. Isn't it, and this is a sincere question, isn't it time for some sort of affirmative effort to bring people who disagree from other walks of life into your world? Well, let me just say a couple things. One, having a great-grandparent who may or may not have been Native American is not a qualification. Being 1/32nd of some racial group is not a qualification. Okay, it's an accident of history. It's something over which you had no control and for which in a just society you would not be rewarded. And so this is an amusing story. Obviously, her campaign's blowing up over this. She's lying. Her remark about, all Indians have high cheekbones. You know, I also like feathers. I mean, it's so offensive and dumb. But leaving that aside, it provide a window into a system that is fundamentally corrupt, that rewards people based on their DNA, which is inherently unfair. It was unfair when it happened under segregation, and it's unfair now. Indeed, it's indefensible. And that's why she doesn't want to talk about this, because she did gain material advantage by lying about her ethnic background. And
but
no one should gain
Tucker,
advantage because of his ethnic background, period.
Harvard has been very clear that she did not gain any material advantage.
No, it has not been clear.
And at the end of the day, she won the teaching award at Harvard 2 years in a row. She won teaching awards at the University of Pennsylvania, at the University of Michigan, at the University of Houston. To question this woman on her qualifications is going to be something that does appeal to folks like you, voters like you, bow tie and white boys. But at the end of the day, it is going to backfire against women who will be absolutely against questioning this woman who has.
All right, let him respond. Jimmy, go ahead, Tucker.
You can use name calling all you like, but you're ignoring the truth, as you know.
I didn't call you a name.
Harvard does award material advantage to people based on their skin color. As you know, Harvard bragged about the fact that she was, quote, a minority professor. She's in no sense a minority. She didn't grow up speaking an Indian language on a reservation, immersed in Indian culture. She couldn't name the tribe that her so-called ancestor was a member of when first asked. She's not American Indian. She posed as one, and Harvard, by its own admission, gives advantage to people who claim to be minority. So that's not one right-winger's opinion. That's a fact. Starting just at the very beginning, shouldn't you get... I've never seen a poll that suggests the majority of Americans support Obamacare, so shouldn't you get buy-in from the public before reorganizing their health care?
The public likes many of the provisions. You poll, keeping your child on your parent's plan till age 26, almost 80% of the public likes that. The public, of course, would like their cake and eat it too, but you cannot have both of those.
Before you continue to patronize the public, let me just make one thing really clear. So the poorest segment of our society is young people. In fact, this generation is the poorest generation of its age in 3 generations. They're the poorest. And yet we're forcing them to buy into the system to subsidize the health care of the old and the sick, who are also the richest segment of our population. Why is that fair, and why would you expect them to like it?
Well, first of all, young kids are subsidized in the Obamacare plan. If they don't make above 100% of poverty, they go on Medicaid, and they get almost cost-free health care. And if they are on the low end of income, they are very heavily subsidized to get health insurance. They're not spending a lot of money for peace of mind and protection. And I think that is a good deal. One of the reasons I'm so passionate...
But they don't think it's a good deal.
Tucker, are you going to let me finish the mic?
Well,
one of the reasons I'm so passionate about
they don't seem
healthcare
to think it's a good deal. That's why you're trying to force them to do it, right? Am I missing something? I just trying to get a straight answer from you. You're trying to force them to do something they don't want to do. You're telling them it's a good deal, but they don't believe it's a good deal.
Oh, there's certainly been a lot of very bad rhetoric and very bad attacks on it, rather than give it its fair shake.
Are you going to blame right-wing talk radio? Wait, hold on. You just made a specific allegation, and I think it's fair to ask you to back it up. You said that rhetoric during the campaign, presumably from the Trump campaign, included abridging the voting rights of African Americans, specifically African Americans. And I'm just asking you to cite that. What are you talking about?
So in Texas and North Carolina, there have been real efforts to to roll back the voting rights legislation of recent decades and to keep people from the polls. And whether that means restricting early voting, whether that means making it harder for people to get to the polls, having fewer polling stations. I'm also referring to the very explicit
Those aren't
efforts
race
to roll
specific.
back.
I mean, look.
Yes,
people respect you as a scholar and a university president, and you're throwing around a lot of intemperate rhetoric that you can't back up. I mean, there was no specific effort. I don't know what you're I don't know what you're talking about, and I think it's unhelpful to make that allegation. But let me just say, finally, you said here, and I'm quoting, "Now, like so many around the country, I find myself wondering whether I should have done more to prevent the election of Donald Trump." And I'm wondering what you mean. What could you, as the president of a liberal arts college or university in Connecticut, have done to prevent the election of Donald Trump?
What I could have done was to ensure that students at Wesleyan who were on the right or the left turned their attention more to national politics. I do think that what I was getting at in that op-ed was that I feel that many of our students on college campuses are being more political now after the election than they were before, that they didn't engage in the political system. And the fact is, right now, we have a new administration coming to power, and I think it's important for us to take stands of principle, not to choose a la carte what laws we're going to obey, but to articulate our principles and to do our best to participate in the public political process. And I think many of our students abdicated that responsibility.
But you say here you wish you'd done more to keep Trump from getting elected. I mean, that's something that a political consultant would say. You're a university president. Do you really see your job as that partisan to prevent a specific candidate from getting elected?